Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 693rd edition of the Feuerstein's Fire American Soccer Show. I'm your host, Daniel Feuerstein, to give you American perspective of our clubs, leagues, players, national team, and other fabulous moments. Get your daily reading from me and other writers over at Beyond the 90, at beyondthe90.substack.com, locally in New York City on baddogsports.com. The chat room in YouTube is open. Come on in, discuss amongst yourselves if you like. You have a question for me, I'll try to answer it to the best of my abilities. So last week, no show because I've been very busy covering a lot of things at baddogsports.com, not just MLS, of course, international football during World Cup qualifying and some of the friendlies, of course. But, you know, watching the U.S. men's national team playing in these last two international friendlies, I have to say they've been looking better. Not a lot better, but a little bit better. And why is that? Why have they looked better? What is the reason? What can we say is the reason that they have looked better? Is it because of the certain players that were picked on the roster for the October window? Probably so. And that one player, I think, who has improved the national team a little bit is Christian Roldan of the Seattle Sounders. I think Christian Roldan is that type of player that the U.S. men's national team has sorely been needing. Because it's not just what he can do on the defensive side of the ball, but he can also do it on the offensive side of the ball. And I think in that match, especially against Australia, he is proving why I think he should be on the national team. Now, we don't know what that will translate next summer for this upcoming World Cup, but in my opinion, if he can unlock something, there's a possibility, a very, very slim possibility, that he can do something special for this national team and hopefully not get them grouped. Because right now, many people are thinking that this national team, for the way that some of the players have been acting, not going to that Gold Cup roster, that this national team will be grouped as a host nation for this upcoming World Cup, like South Africa was. So, once again, it's just my personal opinion that, you know, if there's no Tyler Adams, if there's no Yunus Musa, then, you know, I think Christian Roldan can be that player to excite and to go out and prove a point that he deserves to be on this national team. Now, I know that many people are going to blame him for allowing the first goal to happen. It's just that's not his fault. That's his teammates' fault. They switched off when the ball was thrown back in by the same player who scored the goal. How is it a player retrieves his own thrown-in ball and then puts it into the back of the net? How do you allow that to happen? You can't. That should not be able to happen, but it did. They banked it off of an American player, and then he went into the net and scored it. That should not have happened. And once again, it's a situation where everyone, you know, they switched off, but whose problem was that? Whose man was that? More the back line that I would say rolled on. But, of course, he's near it, so we'll just pick him because why? Because he's an MLS guy. Blame the MLS guy. Blame the Major League Soccer guy. Simple. Easy. That works. Is that guy from MLS? Yeah. Okay. Blame him. I mean, look. This is the time where you cannot quibble on who will be on the roster for next summer. Or should I say this upcoming summer? Cannot quibble about why this player or that player should not be on the roster. When the roster comes out, we'll find out. But until then, we're still in the friendly stage. And that will be next month, November, and then next year in March. And just give me 1 second, folks. I will be right back. So just hang tight. I'll be with all of you in just. Sorry about that, folks. Something had to come to my attention. I just had to get over to it real quick. Sorry about that. But, going back to this national team, once again, I just feel like Roldan is that player that will be the glue to this national team for the World Cup. Now, as I've said already, we cannot quibble about which player comes from what part of the Atlantic Ocean. Are you playing in MLS? Or are you playing in Europe? We can't worry about that anymore. We are no longer at that stage. We are right now at this particular stage that everybody needs to be seen, and we need to make sure that we have our 23 to 26 man roster ready to go. That's it, plain and simple. We have to make sure we have our roster ready to go. Because if we don't, it's going to be a bigger mess than it already is. So that's all I can really tell all of you about this. This is a situation, once again, we got to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. Because if they're not in a row, then we're done for. Everything that we all hoped for in this upcoming World Cup falls apart. And it's back to the drawing board. And then whose fault is it? Many people probably say, well, it should be Pochettino's fault. Normally I would agree, but this go around, I wouldn't even bother pointing the finger at him. I'd point the finger at the players. I would point the finger at how U.S. soccer treated this whole situation. And that's the only time I would do that is if and only if they get grouped. Because we have to understand something here. It's no longer 3 group stage matches, finish in the top 2, go to the round of 16, the quarters, the semis, the finals. That's like 7 rounds. Now it's 8 rounds. Now there's going to be a round of 32 before the round of 16. So we're going to have 8 rounds. coming up very, very soon. And we need to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row and ready for battle when it comes on American soil, on Mexican soil, and Canadian soil, but mostly on our American soil. Because we need to make sure that our players understand there's no more time to mess around. And hopefully they won't suffer any injuries before the World Cup begins in June of 2026, as they're ripped, roaring, and ready to go. And once again, folks, it's a situation where we got to make sure we get the right players coming in, ready to go, and ready to have some fun. And hopefully, put our American players in the correct position to go out and win those games. That's without a doubt. We have to make sure that everything and anything does go our way. And when December the 5th comes at the Kennedy Center in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and we will find out who will be drawn with our national team. This should be a lot of fun. I'm excited. I know you're excited. The World Cup returning to North America, along with our neighbors to the north in Canada, our neighbors to the south in Mexico. The biggest party in world football will be in the 3 North Zone countries of North America and the Confederation of CONCACAF. This is our time to shine. This is our turn to shine. We need our American players to be great. We all know Mexico's players want to be great. And we also know that Canada's players want to be great. This is the moment that we must be ready to go. This must be the moment that our players are going to come out of this and do something amazing. I'm excited. I can't wait. This is going to be exciting and fun. And all I can say is, it's almost here. Can you believe it is almost here? It is almost here, the FIFA World Cup this coming June. It's almost here, folks. We've got one more window of international football. Then we got the month of December for the World Cup draw. March will be friendlies, intercontinental playoffs. Nothing till the beginning of June, around, I believe, the 14th. And then we are ready to go. We are ready for the biggest party in world football. I know you can't wait. I know I can't wait. This is going to be exciting. This is going to be a lot of fun. And we, my friends, are going to have a lot of fun doing it. Well, let me tell you about this segment sponsor. It's Dino Luzzi Energy Drink. When I need that extra kick to power through match analysis and late night transfer rumors, there's only one drink that delivers authentic Italian energy, and that's Dino Luzzi. Drafted in Italy with the same passion I bring to this show, because real energy comes from real ingredients, just like real soccer talk comes from real insiders. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a fabulous show for you tonight, as we're going to talk USL Championship, of course. Joining me tonight, my colleague at Beyond the 90s, KArtik Krishnaiyer. Joining us, covering the Tampa Bay Rowdies, James Knowles from RBLR Sports. There they are, ladies and gentlemen. The Tampa Bay Rowdies have officially been sold, along with, of course, Major League Baseball's Tampa Bay Rays, that was once owned by Stu Sternberg. now given it to Florida-based business executive Patrick Zulupski. We're going to go to James first. James, when the news came out that the Rowdies have finally been sold to Mr. Zulupski, what were your initial thoughts, and what did you hear from the Rowdies faithful about this news?
Well, I mean, I guess that they were mostly along the same lines. What I thought was a sense of optimism. And I think that a lot of the fans who were aware of this, obviously, news does travel fast amongst a crowd like this. So I think that it was mostly a lot of people feeling pretty optimistic as well. We don't have a ton of information specifically related to how the new ownership group is going to approach the Rowdies. And as much as people, including myself at times, I'm sure, have been critical of the ownership group in the past, I do want to highlight that I don't think the Rowdies were one of the most well-supported teams in terms of the outlay specifically allotted to the roster, let's say. However, it should be noted that there were a lot of different moves that the Rowdies ownership made, this is the prior ownership, made during that period off the field. So obviously Al Lang Stadium needed a lot of upgrades, and that was so that it was playable previously. That was before the hurricanes hit last season. Again, there were 2 hurricanes. Maybe there are some coming up this year. I really hope that we avoid them. But at the same time, there were, if you go into Al Lang Stadium now, I don't know how many people listening will ever have the chance to do that, but just to give the background here, when I go for press conferences for the Rowdies, not a big deal, but when you go into the stadium, there is a line, there's a marker up on the wall where the flooding was. So everything that was in the stadium was damaged. I believe they had to at least address the field. They might not have had to totally redo it. That's one thing, but they still needed to address that. And there was a lot of work to the interior of the stadium. I don't think the elevator up to the press area up top above is working at this point. I'm not entirely sure. I don't usually use that, but anyway, my point with all of this is the prior Rowdies ownership group did put a lot of money into the team, in my opinion. There was also the training field that they built up. So the Rowdies have a good deal of value built within them as a club, separate from the Rays. Now, if you put them together, obviously, as most ownership groups seem to do, then that raises the value even more. So along those lines, I think there's a lot going on there. But with this group, I think what everybody was hoping to see was a lot more money specifically spent on the roster. Now, again, there's all that money spent off the field, which I personally really take measures to highlight that every time I can, because a lot of people ignore that kind of stuff. And that's why I really think Tampa Bay Rowdies are an attractive place to go. Florida has a lot of good things going for it. We don't have state taxes. That's pretty good. But at the same time, players and coaches want to come here because we have nice facilities. We have a nice stadium. We have all of this extra stuff that comes with being a player. You don't have to play on turf, on a baseball field, on a high school stadium, all of that kind of stuff every week. However, every year, and this is true, I pointed this out with our podcast, RBLR Sports, every year, the Rowdies run a small roster. Eventually, this comes back to bite us necessarily because it is a short season comparatively. It doesn't feel short, but it is. And you're going to deal with injuries, especially playing in Florida heat and with the travel requirements across the United States. You're going to deal with injuries. That's a necessary part of being in the USL. Sometimes it's going to be a short injury. Sometimes it's going to be an injury that pops up every couple games. Sometimes it's going to be out. One of your best players is out for the whole season. We've seen every single one of those, probably every single year that I've covered the Rowdies. So you can imagine everybody involved knows that that's a problem. And having a small roster, I understand that they're doing that so that they can maximize the amount of talent on the field at any given time. But it does hurt us in the long run over the course of these seasons. And I really think, unfortunately, for the lack of trophies that we've had, and by trophies, I specifically mean the USL Championship, or more recently, you could also point to the Jaeger Cup, the Open Cup. That's where we really need some help. It's the depth. And that's going to be what I'm most specifically looking forward to. I don't know about everybody else, but a lot of our fans did express optimism that there would be more money spent specifically on the team. And I think that's about where most people are.
And that's great to hear. And Kartik, obviously, when we always talk about the clubs in Florida in USL, how much they're dependent on, making sure that their rosters are not so much compliant, but, is there enough depth to give these clubs that extra oomph to make a run in the playoffs, whether it be USL playoffs, the championship, League One, now the Jägermeister Cup that's been around, the Open Cup, like James said. Do you feel Mr. Zalewski, he is this man to now lead the Rowdies into the next phase of their continued existence?
I don't know. It's very early. We don't know yet. But one thing I do want to echo what James said about the impact of the previous ownership group. Another thing they did beyond all of the things James laid out is that they acquired a pretty state-of-the-art training facility, which is better than, I don't want to say 90% of the USL championship clubs, but 75% of them. It's a better training ground. I mean, and that's really the bedrock, because that's where you are every day. Yeah. That training facility, that training ground. So Birmingham Legion, who have a stadium problem also, they just acquired a training ground this season. So that's going to really, I think, kind of improve their lot. So I don't know. I mean, I've heard some speculation that this may be just an additional asset for him. I've also heard some speculation that he would invest more on the playing side, on the technical side. What I do know is, and this was starting under the previous ownership, so maybe it's irrespective of ownership, but there has been some thought that exactly what James outlined on the playing side, that the roster builds have not been good enough. And the reality is this: Tampa Bay had a long-term COO who then became the club president, who I worked with, Lee Cohen, and when I worked at NASL, who I worked closely with, who's now in Charleston. They then had a long-term player who became a coach in Neil Collins, who then left. And since those two figures left the organization, the build on the football side, soccer side, has not been the same, right? They've hit on some players, they've missed on some others. And when, as James said, you have a small squad, you're playing in Florida in the heat and humidity. I just got done explaining this to Miami FC CEO whenever they played Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, that the big mistake they made this year with their roster was signing too many older players. Miami FC looked great in April and May. Then they didn't win a game between the middle of June and the middle of October or early October, because if you have an older, less athletic team in Florida in the heat and humidity, and it's worse for Miami FC because they play on turf. Tampa Bay exactly. Grass. Yeah. So you're it's just illogical to sign those sorts of players. You have to sign for circumstance and situation. And I think a lot of the players Neil Collins and Lee Cohen signed were probably going to be phased out earlier if they had still been in the organization. But the Rowdies have held on to some of those guys for too long. And there's a guy they brought back this season that they had previously who hasn't performed particularly well. He was better in the last game, actually, against Hartford the other night, in Lawrence White. But I think so one of the things I had been hearing, Daniel, I know James has been hearing it also, is that with Dom Casciato, who we all know from the Cosmos, coming in, he went to Omaha in between, but we all know him from the Cosmos. Daniel and I at least do. That there's going to be a change in the technical direction, that he's going to be looking at different kinds of players, maybe a different type of squad build, more depth, maybe more athleticism, something more apt to playing at Al Lang. So that's one positive. Another thing I should say before I forget, the positive thing about this ownership change is Al Lang itself. I had heard and I had reported from a source at the city of St. Petersburg who told me as long as Sternberg owned the club, the Rowdies were in jeopardy of losing the venue, the facility, and they were only giving them a 1-year extension to their lease as a result of that. And I think Brody Brazil reported that as well, Daniel, right? And so that went national once he reported it. That I think will change now with the new ownership. Maybe they can They can get a long-term deal at Al Lang where there can be changes to the venue, positive changes, because baseball's not going to be played there again. So let's dig in. Let's make it a soccer-specific venue. It's one of the two best Vista venues in USL, the other being Highmark. Maybe do what they're doing at Highmark, do some sort of similar renovation, and that would be wonderful if that could happen.
I agree. And I mean, how many times I keep going, whether I'm watching a Rowdies match online, either through CBS or ESPN, or I have to go to Google Maps and I still see the outfield wall out there. I mean, like you said, baseball is done. They're not coming back. There will never be baseball coming back to Al Lang. Just knock out the outfield wall and just build stands out there. It's really simple. But anyway, James, before I don't want to get off track here, obviously. What do you know about Mr. Patrick Zalupski? What is the type of business he does in Florida that also made him an attractive new owner of the Rowdies?
Well, I would say that one of the things that is contingent upon this or related to this question, it's not just Mr. Zalupski, who I believe does real estate, but also in addition to that, there are more people. And KArtik might actually have a little bit more information about this ultimately, but it's a group of people that are involved in this. And I believe that he's the main man, obviously, who took over the Rays. He was the guy that was on, of course, all of the different news outlets and all of their headlines. So we know the name, and that stands out a little bit more. But at the same time, I do think that there are more people behind this. So Stu Sternberg, we had him previously, and he was in a similar situation, you could say. He might not necessarily have been just the one owner. It wasn't a Roman Abramovich, I suppose, situation, but there were multiple people there, and he was kind of the man that everybody knew, the face, the name, the person that everybody saw in the papers. So if I'm not mistaken, that's a similar situation here. But I would like if KArtik could offer a little addition here. He probably knows more than I do on this, just because he actually has the connections with the people at the papers who are probably doing the headlines.
Yeah. So Rick Workman, who was threatening to move the Rays, or I should walk that back. It felt like was threatening to buy the Rays and move them to Orlando, but was officially saying, "Hey, I want to bring MLB to Orlando." But I felt all along his target was the Rays. He's part of the ownership group, and he's a guy that as a minority owner can lend some significant investment while the club stays in the Tampa Bay area. Rowdies also, but the Rays. The CEO of Dex Imaging, who has been a prominent sponsor of both the Rowdies and Orlando City, I forget the guy's name, but he's part of the ownership group. And then Bill Cosgrove, who's a well-known mortgage guy in the state, and sometimes that trips us up with red flags because of Robert Palmer and the poor job that's been done in the management of the Jacksonville Armada. Just because this guy comes from the mortgage industry doesn't mean he'll be as contemptuous of a soccer club. That's a subject for another day, the whole thing that's happened with the Armada. And so I don't want to make this about that. But so he's got a mortgage background, and he's pumping some money in. I think with all these investors, especially the Dex Imaging guy, who has been a prominent sponsor of both the Rowdies and Orlando City for many, many years. In fact, so many of the tchotchkes they used to give us as media members in Orlando at the Orlando City Stadium, and before that at the Citrus Bowl, were sponsored by Dex Imaging. And they've done things, right, James? They've done a lot with the Rowdies too. I think they've been on different Rowdies paraphernalia through the years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So he's part of the group. So maybe he's the guy who'll take the lead on soccer, because he obviously has an established relationship with the club already and with the sport.
Yeah, that's also something to consider. With multiple people involved, you don't necessarily have to have one person as the front man, right? You don't have to have one person kind of covering both bases here, because it is two different teams, even though it is all under one umbrella.
Yeah, which would be a good thing. Actually, let me just jump in. The one thing I will say about the previous ownership is I think they started to, once Lee Cohen left and then Neil Collins left. But the Lee Cohen leaving was probably more significant in terms of the front office. They started pushing things off to Rays staff. And they even took some staff from the Rowdies, people who were very soccer savvy and had been involved with other clubs previously. I don't want to get into specific names, and move them over to the baseball side. So they kind of stripped the Rowdies staff also. They took some of the most talented people from the Rowdies staff who had sponsorship relationships, had relationships with the sport specifically, and understood the player side, and moved them to the baseball side. And that bothered me. So if we had two separate staffs, I think that would be good, quite frankly.
Yeah. James, now with Stu Sternberg out, I mean, obviously it still says he's a minority owner, but still, though, he's not going to be handling the day-to-day operations anymore for the Rowdies. Well, for the Rays, too. But what would you make about his tenure as owner of the Rowdies? Is it good? Was it horrible? Somewhere in between? What would you say with Stu Sternberg's ownership at the time?
I'm probably a little more supportive than I think a lot of people would be who would know the name Stu Sternberg off the top of their head, I guess. But again, I'm looking at the Rowdies, and on the field, we have had a good deal of success that unfortunately has always come just short of a trophy, right? So we don't have any USL championship trophies in the cabinet. We have, I think at least one Eastern Conference, if not two or three, but nobody wants a conference trophy, right? They want the next one. So if you're talking about specifically hardware, that's one place where the team fell short. Other than that, in all honesty, I do think that a lot of it was successful. I've already talked about a lot of the off-field stuff. I don't want to keep repeating myself about that, but just to really quickly re-highlight those one more time, we do have a very nice training facility. We have the upgrades at Al Lang. We have the redoing of Al Lang after a hurricane season. And that was a lot of money. I don't have like figures here, but that's not something I have access to, but that did cost a lot of money. So all of those things. Al Lang, KArtik already talked about how nice a vista it is. I have not been to Highmark. That's on my bucket list, so I'll get there someday. But I really, really think Al Lang Stadium is an incredible place to play soccer, not only because of the vista, which is very nice, but truly the downtown setting. If you're going to have lower divisions, I mean, in my opinion, all soccer in America should try to be as close to a downtown hub as possible. This is another thing, like KArtik said, this is another thing that's a separate issue. But Al Lang Stadium is right downtown St. Pete. You can walk to multiple bars, not just the one across the street. And if people are going to buy tickets, it's not just going to generally be people who like soccer, right? It's not just going to be people who are like, I need to go see soccer this weekend or I'm going to die. That's not going to be a whole lot of people. You need to have it as part of a night. Here's our little itinerary, and soccer's a part of it. So Al Lang is a big thing here. If you keep all of the off-field stuff in mind, truly, I do think that the Rowdies have had a very successful last 10 plus years. And it's true. The other side of it, though, is on the field, we've been this close over and over to tasting success. We made 2 USL championship finals, one which was not played, of course, due to COVID, and then one which we lost at home. That was very unfortunate. But to get so close and to not make it, I think that that's going to leave a taste in fans' mouths. That's probably, well, you can't say that it's not deserved because that's how things work. That's how sports is. But at the same time, you just have to remember the good and the bad, I suppose. And there's a lot of good that doesn't translate to what you're literally watching on the field every single game. It doesn't translate to, oh, we got this many goals. Oh, we got this many points. We earned our way into the playoffs. We won a trophy. You don't necessarily see that, but there's a lot of stuff before you get to players being on your field and actually playing a soccer game. And, you know, I can't avoid that. So if we're giving it out of a 10, I'm putting it close to 8, 9 out of a 10, because there's so much more than just we didn't win a trophy. We got close, and that was really unfortunate for me that we didn't get there. But at the same time, we have made so much more progress, and I think that as a club we have so much more stability and so much more infrastructure, so much more literal infrastructure than the vast majority of clubs around the league.
Yeah, Kartik, I think we need to talk about something I wrote, of course, on our site Beyond the 90, that the Rowdies must be sold like the Tampa Bay Rays. And, that was my little piece, supporting the Rowdies, hopefully getting a transition from Stu Sternberg to someone else. And once again, I did talk a little baseball in it, but, they're both intertwined. What were your thoughts when you saw me write that article?
Well, quite frankly, you put in writing, you had the courage to put in writing something that all of us were talking about privately. This was at a point when I think there had already been, and James can speak more directly to this, chatter in the crowd at Al Lang, and chants of "We want our club back." That really started in that Orlando City game, that 5-0 match, which was, and then followed up with two embarrassing performances in a row against Charleston and against Rhode Island. And it was something that was impacting the players. I'm convinced of that now. I know that there's been a coaching change since, and we can give Dom a lot of credit for the revival this season. And I think he deserves a lot of the credit. And they made several moves during the season, which have helped the team. But I think part of it also was the uncertainty over ownership and the feeling at that point that they may not even be in Al Lang beyond this season, because the city was playing such hardball. So that's that you put in writing what people were talking about privately. So you had the courage to do that and started the ball rolling, I think, in terms of this. The on the field stuff, I guess, is one aspect of it. Yes, supporters are frustrated that the Rowdies haven't won a USL title. They've gotten to 2 finals, as James mentioned. They were a kick away from winning the Supporters Shield. Wrong league. Players Shield a couple of years ago under Nicky Law, and got beat, and then got beat in the first round of the playoffs. But they were close to winning that. Haven't won an actual league championship since Ricky Hill won it when Andy Nestor is the owner in 2012. By the way, Andy Nestor is now the president of West Brom, former Rowdies owner, because the West Brom owners are actually from Tampa. The Patel family, who are prominent USF trustees, own West Brom, and they've taken Andy Nestor over there, and he's been promoted to president, the former Rowdies owner. But so it's been 13 years since winning a league title, but I think the fundamentals of the organization have been so good. I agree with James. I may not give them quite an 8, but maybe a 7, which is better than most clubs in USL, to where it's a consistent looking product from year to year. It's a consistent feel product, whether they're winning or losing. There are very few other clubs established in lower division soccer that have that consistency, that strength in terms of feel, that consistency in terms of their fan bases. Very, very few. It's a very short list. No, we're not going to put them in the same category with Sacramento and Lou City and now Rhode Island, but who else is in that category? No one. They're in the tier immediately below that, and that's better than any number of clubs that we've seen go out of business. If we just go back to my time working in the NASL, most of the clubs I worked with are out of business. The Rowdies, along with North Carolina FC, are the two holdouts from the beginning, right? We had Indy come in eventually and Miami FC come in eventually, but none of the other clubs that I worked with directly for the whole period of time, Fort Lauderdale, New York Cosmos. Oh, I guess the Cosmos are coming back, but it's not the same club, really. None of these other clubs are still Atlanta Silverbacks. None of them are still around. So that speaks highly to the foundational base that this ownership, and quite frankly, the previous ownerships. I mentioned Andy Nestor and David Laxer, and then the ownership in between of Bill Edwards. put in place. So that's something. I mean, Daniel, you've written over and over again about the fail rate of clubs in the lower divisions in the U.S. Well, the Rowdies now have had 16 seasons of this iteration. That's pretty darn good. Very few clubs have had that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And very happy that the Rowdies are still around, still kicking, and hopefully they'll still be around another 16 years. Now with this new ownership group, James, joining forces with the head coach, Dominic Casciato, do we feel that there could be open lines of communication between the coaching staff, the sporting director, and the front office now, and the ownership group? Do you feel now will be a lot better moving forward, that maybe finally there's an opportunity for some hardware coming the Rowdies' way?
Well, that's a question. This is the big question, I suppose, right? This is the big question following the transition here. Everybody's very excited at the prospect of this, because supposedly or seemingly, this is an ownership group with even bigger pockets, let's say. So if that's the case, then ultimately you would hope that someone who has the prestige of Dominic Casciato within the USL setup, within the USL environment, someone like that also, he's not going to have guarantees of this or that, I doubt, but at the same time, he does command a little bit more respect. Neil Collins, he didn't probably when he first came on as a coach, right? Because he joined at literally a week after playing a game. So that's a little different, but he built that respect. And within USL, Dominic Casciato, maybe he's not at the same level as Neil Collins, but he has a lot of respect within this environment. So I believe that there are a lot of things going for Dominic Casciato that will lead to us doing better one way or another. The question that we are probably not going to hear directly from individuals, at least not yet. Maybe this is something we'll hear in the future, but I think that the level of communication, the level of transparency between the ownership group, any direct sporting director of the soccer side of things, and then the actual front office of the club, the Rowdies. I think that that's something that we're going to learn about later on, unfortunately. But I think that Dominic Casciato is a person. He might not have been brought in specifically by the ownership group that is involved right now. He might have been brought in by somebody who said, look, this is kind of lined up. We're looking at this future. I'm assuming you would like to be a part of something this big. We can offer this to you. Plus, we have all the off-field stuff. So come on board if that's something you'd like. And Dominic Casciato said, that's good enough for me. But again, he does command a lot of respect here. So if he's got the clout, so to speak, if he's got the clout to get the ownership group to back him and back him the way that he needs, which is going to ultimately be salaries, right? He needs enough money to pay salaries to bring in the players that he wants. If he's backed properly, I do expect good things.
No, that's great to hear. And hopefully that can happen for the Rowdies for the 2026 season. And Kartik, I guess finally from me for you is this. What future now do you see with the USL that they are attracting these newer types of owners? Not just the former professional athletes like Dominic Wilkins, who has just taken over Birmingham Legion last year, or brand new owners coming in. They're now infected with the football bug, the soccer bug. What's your thoughts of this right now?
Yeah, I mean, USL is very much focused on this idea that they need to get some celebrity owners, which isn't always the best fit, but you need also owners that have some sort of stability and local ties, community ties, and the ability to understand, because these are all, like James said earlier, every football club in this country, this isn't college football or the NFL, right, with the huge massive fan bases, needs to be operated like a community club, has to be operated like a grassroots operation. So I think they need to attract more of those owners. USL as a league, their focus seems to be very much based around real estate. They've just gone around announcing a bunch of teams here in the state of Florida, potential teams, one actually we have a firm date for, which is Port St. Lucie in 2027.
Right.
Although there's some massive local pushback against that stadium project that I've been busy this week, so I haven't been able to flush it out yet for Florida Soccer Report, which James and I do on Beyond the 90. But I need to get to that in the next few days. But the league seems to be focused on retail developments and attaching stadiums and stadium projects, soccer-specific stadium projects to that. That's great, but then you also need to get the ownership piece right. And I feel like in a lot of cases, they're going in with owners whose first focus may not be football, and their or they're celebrities who are lending their name, like although I have to say, Batista in Las Vegas, I'm hearing is a fantastic owner. It's just the team hasn't gotten it right. They have to fix the technical side, but he's a fantastic hands-on owner. But more often than not, when you get these celebrity former athletes, they're not going to be hands-on. But big news today, I'll just leave you guys on this, is Brian McBride going to Brooklyn for next season.
I saw that.
Yep. So that'll be good.
Yep.
That'll be big. So that's getting a soccer guy in a soccer role. That's what I want to see, not necessarily a former player as an owner or a former or some sort of celebrity. That's it. A soccer guy in a soccer role. That's a positive for USL. That one.
Yeah, it really is. And I'll tell you this right now, gentlemen. I'm just happy that the fortunes are changing for the Rowdies. It looks like it's going to be upward and onward on that trajectory. Who knows? I mean, hopefully, like I said, knock down the outfield wall at Al Lang, build stands there, make it really a soccer stadium finally, and just make everything shine the way it should when we talk about this wonderful game we call football. James Knowles, RBLR Sports, my colleague at Beyond the 90, KArtik Krishnaiyer. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll talk to both of you sometime down the road. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, great to talk with both KArtik Krishnaiyer and with James Knowles, doing their best, of course, covering not just regular soccer, but of course, lower division soccer, international soccer, anything and everything. It's just great to work with great guys like those two. It is just unbelievable. Now waiting for my next guest to come on tonight, John Krasinski from Pittsburgh Soccer Now, as we get ready to talk about something that happened that was strangely came out of nowhere. If you want to say out of left field, I'll tell you it came out of left field big time. Came out of left field where we find out that Bob Lilly was, if you want to call it, suspended for the rest of the season by the club. That's what you want to call it. That's okay. But, you know, all I can tell you is this, is that, you know, I just don't know what happened. And hopefully we'll get John Krasinski on the show very soon, ready to go. And we can have some fun and get some information to see what's going to happen. So, you know, once again, it's just a situation where I'm shocked. And I'll tell you why I'm shocked. I'm shocked because Bob Lilly has done so much good in lower division soccer. And, you know, to hear this news that popped out of nowhere on social media was just crazy. And to now talk about that crazy news, the editor and creator of Pittsburgh Soccer Now, John Krasinski, joining me. John, as I was telling the audience, when the news broke from the Riverhound Twitter page, I was completely shocked and I was bewildered. I had no idea what in the hell happened. I don't know if you've ever gotten any more news about it, but what were your thoughts when you saw that news pop up?
Hey, Daniel. Yeah, the news was, I think everyone was quite surprised, but organizationally, the Riverhounds, you know, were following some sort of procedure here in terms of, you know, how to deal with a situation where, you know, there's not a lot to say. We were all sort of shocked, and we were like, well, the Riverhounds are just, you know, playing this by the book, and on some level, it's someone that their head coach, the person that's been most instrumental in the club's success in the last 8 years is on administrative leave. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could all speculate. We speculated a lot. There was a lot of, what happened, questions, things of that nature. Is Bob Lilly the architect of the Riverhound success? But he's also he has a strong personality. Let's just say that. So that, but it could just be any number of things. And I think the first thing that came to my mind was, it's not fair to speculate. I don't want to speculate. As a journalist, I'm looking at facts. I'm looking for, I got tons of leads, of course, or the day or within hours, within minutes in some cases. There's some things that are out there that, again, as a responsible journalist, you don't want to share some of the things you're hearing about until you have all the facts together. And because of that, I think the Riverhounds have done a very good job of kind of keeping it, keeping it. There's an investigation, or this is a club matter, and that he's on administrative leave. And maybe I'm even jumping the gun by even saying the word investigation. I don't even know if there's an investigation. Nothing has been confirmed along those lines, but he is on administrative leave. And in the interim, the story is the team itself and Robbie Vincent taking over as the acting head coach, and as of now, Bob Lilly is still the head coach of the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, but he's on administrative leave.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was shocked myself. I'm not going to speculate anything either, but all I can tell you is I'm shocked. I mean, this man not just has done wonderful 8 seasons of Riverhound soccer. Even before then, the former Rochester Rhinos got them a USL championship. I mean, Bob Lilly, to me, I don't know if you can say equally, but close towards, maybe the Bruce Arena of USL. I'll go that far. But I mean, just the news that came out really surprised the hell out of me. And of course, I came to you first because you're closer to the ground over there than any of us are. And, once again, you're doing your due diligence. You're being, like you said, you're doing what you need to do. And you're also respecting the process, which I agree completely. Cannot go half-cocked and assume this is what happened. No, that's what happened. No, maybe this is actually what happened. We're going to have to hopefully wait and get the news once it does get announced.
Yeah, and the status is, the first game that they played after, it was within 24 hours. So the news came out on a Friday evening. They had a game Saturday evening at 7. Game finished. The media's there. They're pretty much, we're being told that, that there's really not much to say, and that, I will credit Coach Vincent, now former player, Robbie Vincent. Just kind of like a good. He's served as the assistant coach this past couple of years. It's kind of a calming. He has a calming nature about him. He always has. He's just, that's just his temperament, and very even keel. But also one to not sugarcoat anything. And he talked about how that 24-hour period was difficult, but they came together, that he couldn't do it alone because Bob, there's the one thing about Bob Lilly, as all, strong-willed coaches are, they want to have full control. And Bob has always been that type of coach. So everyone that works around him, he obviously gives autonomy to, his assistant coaches, and he works with them. But, he's definitely the final say, as Bob Lilly say, as far as, decisions and everything that goes in terms of how the club operates. And, like I said, he's a kind of an old school coach in that way. His father was in the military, so he's talked to me about that. So he definitely likes to, have sort of that, that strong control, in terms of management and managing players and managing his team and all aspects of the operation. But as far as his intricate knowledge and what he brings to the table, it's very rare. You mentioned Bruce Arena. Bob beat Bruce Arena in New England a few years ago in the Open Cup. Like Bob is won over 400 games as a coach. He is, I believe, and we did the research, he has more wins than any other coach in the United States soccer, or definitely among active coaches on all levels. And he's won it. He's won championships. He's done it all. He's a USL, the original USL Hall of Famer. His accolades speak for themselves. That's all there. But you get into this stage in coaching career where it's challenging. Maybe there's young players. I've been at practices. I've interviewed him many times, so many times over the years, and he's had good days, he's had bad days. With regards to interviewing with the media, and he's very, very generous with media. So he always gives the time and long answers. That's one of his trademarks. You ask him one question and you could pretty much fill a full story right there and then and there. But and I appreciate Bob on so many levels and his generosity. So I'm kind of going all around just talking about him and as an individual, as a coach, as a personality, and I think that's why I think this is, Bob has given everything to the game, and so I think I'm sure on some level, whatever, him not being on the sidelines is definitely definitely has to be frustrating or difficult for him to deal with at this time, I'm sure. And we haven't heard too much talk about anything else other than, what could have happened and all the speculation, this and that and the other thing. But I will say that the team's success, and there are some writers that maybe disagree with me. They think that Vincent's handling of this team in the last two games has added to their 2-game winning streak, that they've been able to push beyond and get that second goal in both games to take 2-goal leads. It's very critical, and that that they're getting to the finish line. Maybe the players are responding better to the current coaching situation. That's just some hearsay. That's different people's opinions, but I do think this team and everything that they have done to this point in the season and the build-up, Bob Lilly teams always finish strong, and there's a lot of you could see a lot of the things that they're doing really well are trademarks of a Bob Lilly coach team, and Danny Griffin, also the team's captain, spoke after the first match, that first match without Coach Lilly, and he's like, he's my coach and he's my guy, so he didn't say too much beyond that, but he definitely supports his coach, and he was talking about Coach Lilly. So I don't know if there's a division among the players and all of that. There's a lot of rampant speculation along these lines. It's the club, I will, to their credit, if they want to control the narrative here, they're doing a pretty good job of kind of keeping everything quiet.
What have the fans? Yeah, no, I agree with you. What are the fans thinking about Rob Vincent, who's now currently taking over on an interim basis? Obviously, a club legend himself on those years in Pittsburgh for the River Hounds. What are the fans are saying?
Yeah, and beloved. At the Steel Army, they had songs, of course, in support of Robbie. And, his 2015 season is, as you used the word legend, I think it was stuff of legend. The Steel Army song, I think can't get enough of Robbie Vincent. They took that song and kind of made it their own in his tribute. But as a player legend, 3 and seasons plus an extra game in 2016, he came back over from DC United on loan for 1 game. My book, The Miracle on the Mon, it captures a moment in the club's history when Robbie Vincent hits the game tying goal, and then Kevin Kerr hits the game winning goal after they were trailing Harrisburg by 3 goals 3 different times in the match, and by 3 goals heading into the 90th minute. So it was, by 2 goals heading into the 90th minute. So it was a remarkable moment that sort of in many ways kind of transformed the club, in the beginning of the Highmark Stadium era after some ups and downs. And I think a lot of the fans believed that this franchise was capable of bigger and better things. And I think Robbie Vincent and Kevin Kerr and that group that was there in 2015 gave the fans that hope. And I think the fans, the diehard Pittsburgh Riverhounds fans, will always remember that. And he will always have a very special place in their hearts. So, here's a guy who now is, on the sidelines and guiding the team through a difficult situation. And I wrote about that. I wrote about, Robbie Vincent's been there. He's dealt with adversity. He had to come up and make it as a Division II player, and made it all the way to MLS, and he's had injuries and he had a lot of difficult things that he had to overcome. And he had his career cut short. He could have given up, but now he's coaching and doing really well. So he's someone. The long-winded version of this is everything I just said, but in summary, he's just someone that the fans. He's beloved here in Pittsburgh for sure.
No, he really is. I could tell. Obviously, I remember watching when the MLS 2 teams were playing in USL. I remember watching Rob Vincent playing against the Red Bulls 2 at Red Bull Arena, now Sports Illustrated Stadium. How he scored that goal to tie it up before Anthony Wallace ripped one from distance to get the win, though. He really showed me something when he was facing Red Bulls 2 at that time. I think it was back in 2000.
That was 15. That was 15. I remember that game.
Yep.
I remember that game. It was a wild back and forth game, and I think it ended 3-2, as you said.
Yeah.
They had some good battles with Red Bulls. Of course, later that season, I was there. I was at Red Bull Stadium at the time, now Sports Illustrated Stadium, for the wild extra time match between the two, and Red Bulls outlasted the Riverhounds and Vincent in that game. It was quite a season. That was a wild season. They scored a lot of goals, but they weren't very good at protecting the goal.
No, they weren't, unfortunately. But still, though, Rob Vincent's a hell of a player. Now the interim coach at this point in time. I guess, until we find out all the facts, and hopefully it's nothing serious, but until we find out all the facts, and I'm not asking you to speculate, obviously, but hopefully, when you do find out, please come back on the show, let everyone know what the heck's going on so that we know what the situation is. And hopefully it's nothing terrible, nothing bad. But go ahead.
No, I just, we're monitoring the situation. Like I said, I've had some leads. I've talked to, there's some things out there that we've been investigating and looking into and talking to some people behind the scenes. But again, we're not. I mean, the club's been pretty quiet and they've kept everything pretty tight and under wraps. And so that's all we can say right now. Again, I would hate to waste even 15 minutes in an interview or any time on Pittsburgh Soccer Now speculating. So we haven't really run with that story. We've run with here's how the team's doing under the circumstances, and we've left it out there for keeping the objectivity, as the main theme here, because it's just unfair to speculate and say anything one way or another. I will say this, Daniel, and I appreciate the time tonight to be on with you, but I will say that there had been some rumblings earlier in the season, in terms of some fans not being happy with Bob. If this is part of that at all, I have no idea. But there was a very, very small, group of supporters, and there were people chanting "Fire Lily." I mean, it is what it is. That was out there. We knew that. Devin Kerr was interviewed with me, and he expressed, Devin Kerr, USL analyst, expressed how he couldn't believe that the supporter group would, for a coach who has had as much success as he's had, to be criticized at that level, by the club supporter group. that was going on. There was definitely some friction there. How it affected Bob, and I'm not, we really didn't get into it. I know he responded in post-match interviews very diplomatically about a lot of, the frustrations that the team was having earlier this season and early last season. But again, both times this team has come on strong towards the end of the season. So again, tribute to Bob Lilly, because he keeps that team focused over the long haul of the season. He's been doing it for so long, and he's so good at it.
No, he really is. And like I said, as soon as you find out what's going on, just let me know, give me a holler, and I'll get you back on as soon as possible.
All right, thanks,
John,
Dana.
thanks again as always. I appreciate it. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you again
You
soon.
too.
All right.
Take care. Thanks.
All right, take care. That's John Krasinski, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, on the Bob Lilly situation that we are just. We'll find out when we find out. At the moment, everything's under wraps, and that's all we can do right now, and wait till we get to the final answer. And until that does come, we'll just have to wait until it does. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to finish up with the New York Red Bull season as they officially ended their 2025 season, losing on the road against the Columbus Crew by a final of 3-1. Looked kind of promising in the opening half. Obviously, Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting scored his 17th of the season and his 18th in all competitions. But 3 straight from the Columbus Crew. Anders Herrera equalizing it 1-1. Daniel Gazdag slipping it through in the second goal to make it 2-1. And then poor distribution. But, of course, poor job once again by Kyle Duncan. Not in the right place to accept that distribution, as Ibrahim Aliyu found a way to bury the ball in the back of the net to make it 3-1 Columbus, and the New York Red Bulls end on a losing streak as they are now into the offseason preparing for the 2026 MLS regular season. What can we say about this New York Red Bulls team? They just did not do the job. They fell very badly on the road. Poor communication, poor positioning, and just at the back end, poor away matches. And when they needed those big wins to come up huge, they could never get it either at home or on the road. And that's why the Chicago Fire were able to make the playoffs, and the Red Bulls did not. It's just a very, very disgruntled situation. It's very, very damning. And once we find out about what's going to happen at the end of the season press conference, we will inform you, of course, the New York Red Bull media, of what is happening during that time. But once again, it is very, very dissatisfying to see what the New York Red Bulls have done. And 15 consecutive seasons of making the playoffs, there will not be a 16th consecutive season. That record is now officially dead and buried. But I want to thank my guests tonight, KArtik Krishnaiyer from Beyond the 90, James Knowles from RBLR Sports, and John Krasinski from Pittsburgh Soccer Now. My name is Daniel Feuerstein. Thank you very much for watching me tonight. And, of course, join me tomorrow night. I'll have on Jason Longshore from 92.9 FM The Game in Atlanta, Georgia, as we talk about both situations of the club in Atlanta United, as Brad Guzan calls it quits and retires, and the club sacks Ronnie Deila. And then we'll review the second round of qualifying for the amateurs for the 2026 Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. Once again, my name is Daniel Feuerstein. Thank you very much for watching me tonight. And as always, please, 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 please enjoy your football. Thank you. Take care. So long. And bye-bye for now. Have a good night, everybody.